It's halftime at the State House as the Indiana General Assembly's work is now 5 weeks old. Crucial legislative deadlines this week marked the midpoint of the 2024 session as lawmakers work to get their bills to the other chamber. Top Senate priority bills heading to the House include improving Hoosier students' reading skills, increasing child care access and affordability, and expediting lead pipe replacement. And among the House measures that are moving are priority bills to expand work-based learning for high school students, provide a 13th check to the state's nearly 100,000 retired public employees, and define anti-Semitism and condemn it as religious discrimination. Also moving from House to Senate is a bill that would prohibit counties from regulating lemonade stands run by a minor on private property. Will the passage of House Bill 1019 help turn those lemons into lemonade? We'll ask our guests about that, among other topics, on this week's Primetime. Good evening, I'm Bruce Haines, and with us today is 16th District Republican State Senator and Assistant Majority Caucus Chair Justin Busch, and 83rd District Republican State Representative Chris Judy. And as always, we invite you to join the conversation. Just call in with your questions and comments by using the number on the screen. As we widen out to prove to you we have guests, there they are. We have Senator Busch, we have Representative Judy, Justin and Chris, and we'd like to know you as well. If you have a comment or question for either of them, please call as we move on. And thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it.
Happy to be back, Bruce. Thank you.
It seemed like 5 weeks flew by quickly. It probably was one of those, you wake up one day and it's Monday, and you wake up the next day and it's February. What are your impressions of this first half? And maybe those aren't them.
I think this is, like you said, flew by. Of course, we had the long session last time with the budget we put together. So this has felt fast and furious on the Senate side, and I'm sure that my friend and colleague feels the same way.
Yes, very fast. We've moved our priority bills, and we'll come back Monday and start going through the Senate bills, and vice versa. The Senate will start looking at House bills that have passed out of the House.
I remember House leadership saying, too, we were going to take a less is more approach, maybe fewer bills. And numerically, like a football game, there are statistics that show something to the effect of the Senate filing a little under 300 bills, but only passing a third to send to the House. The House had 450 some bills, but passed only about 25% of those to go to the Senate. Do those kinds of numbers make a difference in what time you have or arguably don't have?
I like to think so. We're limited to 5 bills in the Senate, and for me, that's an easy target to hit, Bruce. Usually, I like to think we could maybe tear out some pages of Indiana code instead of adding to that. So I had 2 bills of those 5, but I think we had a lot of my colleagues that, of course, brought all those bills to the Senate. So I think in a short session, that makes a lot of sense. We have a lot more of a truncated time to think about that piece of legislation, and that helps us quite a bit, I think, of lowering the kind of the work that we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. It's hard to, I've introduced a few pieces of legislation that I think need a long session to actually take a look at, and just introducing those ideas this session and talking to folks about those ideas moving into that long session next year.
Yeah, and being able to live up to this idea of less is more, or fine-tuning. I've heard that, that reference as well. Descriptors for the session have been on literacy and healthcare. And do you get the sense that the early nomenclature for what you've been involved with has been true to form, or have there been some surprises for you legislatively?
I would say it's been true to form. On our side, we've concentrated on expanding that work-based learning that we've kind of started with the long session last year, along with the science of reading and critiquing that a little bit, and then. Again, I think keeping it limited to some of the healthcare issues. We had such heavy lifts in the last long session that I think we really need to see those policies implemented and play out and gather that data.
Mm-hmm. And you have both been involved as co-authors and sponsors in all of those aspects of those key bills in both chambers. Justin, let me start with you too, with that idea of the focus on student literacy and Senate Bill 1 being predominant as the rest follow suit behind it. Talk of what you're aspiring that bill to accomplish.
Yeah, sure. Linda Rogers was the person that took that bill, and she's been working with all sides, with the Department of Education, and also meeting with administrators. And we're talking about the fact that do our kids in school have the literacy we're looking for once they pass that third grade level? I think we all know that reading means so much, and do these folks have the ability to go ahead and finish their studies from 4th to 12th grade and be able to read at the comprehensive level that have them to be successful as a member of our society? So I know it's a tough issue. We certainly don't want to keep kids stuck at that level in third grade, to keep them there. But we also got to make sure that we're looking at kindergarten, first and second grade, that they're meeting the kind of matrix that they need to be able to refine their studies as things become more difficult as they go into those grades. So it's something I've talked with a lot of superintendents and administrators about. I think we need to get this right, and we're going to work through this. I look forward to my friends in the House, of course, Chris, Judy, to make sure that we are going to get this right. So these kids as we graduate them, to be, go to college or go into the trades, whatever it may be, that reading is essential to promoting their lives and being a great member of society.
And we've heard this phrase too of learning to read as opposed to reading to learn, mm-hmm. and that grade 3 it turns out to be the pivot point. And I think, Chris, this is a dimension in 1001 too, is it not?
Yeah, and expanding those work-based learning opportunities as they move on into the higher grades. But I'd have to agree with Senator Busch on this. The last thing we want to do is fail a child at third grade and having to repeat that. And I think the best way, especially talking those that are stakeholders within our school systems, is being able to identify those childs before third grade and getting them the assistance they need before they get to that third grade level.
Yeah, I know the governor has hoped as a goal for his administration that 95% of students in third grade can read proficiently by 2027. And so it seems that these key pieces of legislation are working to step toward the accomplishment of that goal.
Yes, sir. Exactly.
Behind the, in fact, let's stay though with 1001, because that is a key piece now that you'll be receiving and mm-hmm. comes out of the classrooms. And maybe this is speaking too to what House Speaker Todd Houston was saying, Chris, about wanting to do some tweaking and some fine tuning. We heard before the session began that as coming out of 2023, the bill was strong, but it needed to be refined in such a way to encourage apprenticeships and things of that nature? Correct.
Not every student is going to go to a 4-year degree or necessarily a 2-year degree. I think there's apprenticeship opportunities, that work-based learning, and really finding that pathway for that student to be successful.
And so far, fair hearing all the way through. And what are your senses telling you when you see that one on your desk?
No, I think that I echo the comments of my friend and colleague here. I come from a blue-collar roots. My folks met on the line at Harvester, and certainly I've talked to in the past couple of days. I've talked to the Carpenters Union, the Pipe Fitters Union. There's a lot of pathways to success. Especially in Northeast Indiana, we have the highest concentration of manufacturing jobs in the nation, in our corner of the state. But also, making sure that reading is paramount to everything that we do. So, and I'm very happy that both those bills have kind of made that crossover now, so we can talk to each other and hopefully come up with the best solution that's going to be right for all Hoosiers.
While there were comments made about wanting this to be a quiet session, one important bill that also found its way from the House to the Senate in pretty due course was 1002, which is the one that defines anti-Semitism and condemns it as religious discrimination in education. Sounds familiar because in 2023 there was a similar bill, and the question had been asked in the margins, how does the Senate feel this year? How does the Senate feel this year?
I don't know if I can speak for the entire Senate, but
no pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. But certainly we're seeing that now on the national stage, right? With the war that's happening with Palestine and Israel, and I think that we want to make sure that the Hoosier states can be welcome for everyone there. And it's something that have seen the atrocities, who's had the blessing to go to Europe and tour concentration camps and see those kind of things. And I think there was a recent poll that showed that over 60%, I think it was, plus in New York, of discrimination is happening of folks of the Jewish faith. And we need to make sure that everyone knows that they're welcome here in Indiana. And we're gonna have to take a really hard look at what we're gonna see that comes over here to make folks understand. I believe it was Dennis Cruz that passed that all high school students have to learn about the Holocaust at the high school level. So it's something that we need to be sensitive of all Hoosiers to know they feel welcome here.
Anything
And I
you'd like
agree.
to add on
And
that?
I think this bill also strikes that balance of defining what anti-Semitism is, and then as far as that freedom of speech of being able to still criticize possibly the government of Israel, but having that balance and making sure that we define that clearly.
Well said.
Yeah. We are talking this evening with Senator Justin Busch and State Representative Chris Judy here on PrimeTime. If you'd like to give us a call, feel free to do so. As we move through, the key measures are the key ones, and there are some others that each of you has been involved in. And I wanted to be sure to speak to one that you've each had a role in here locally, and that is working with the State House bill to support local veteran nonprofit issues. This is Martin Carbaugh's efforts to expand the Veterans Museum out US 30 Way, just west of Fort Wayne, to support a columbarium near the Vietnam War Memorial. Give us the backstory, and Chris, I guess let me start with you since this was House generated, but this is Martin's bill, but you're in, and Justin's a sponsor, and can't help but not. I want to be sure that we get this in the program.
Yes. Well, first of all, definitely, if you haven't had a chance to visit the War Memorial out there on a day road, please do. I mean, they have the replica of the Vietnam War Memorial along with the Korean War Memorial now. But what this bill essentially does is it removes this $100,000 fee that they would have had to have paid to be able to bring that columbarium on site. So it waives that fee, gives them the opportunity to place that there, and that's essentially what the bill does, and it brings another opportunity for the War Memorial out there.
And we're very pleased to see that come over here. And I know that my friend Representative Judy is a humble man. This is someone who's worn the uniform and who understands what it means to serve, and to have him on that bill is fantastic as well. I certainly appreciate Representative Carbaugh, and it's that. I'm out there often, actually. It's about a 2-minute drive from where I live to out that Vietnam Memorial. So to be able to have those Vietnam veterans and all veterans that would like to, have their remains placed there is very important to them. And I'm happy to carry that from Representative Carbaugh, and very pleased to have a veteran like Chris Judy on that bill as well.
And it's coming to the Senate floor sometime soon. Obviously, halftime has to end eventually. Everyone goes back on the field.
No pressure, Bruce. Well, hopefully, I'll get it through. I'll get it through committee.
Just follow your blockers.
I might have to pull on the big guns and have Representative Judy come over and speak as well. Yeah.
Well, let's see how we can tackle some calls that have come into our program. This one from Alan, who wants to know. Pardon me. What is the impact of House Bill 1383 on wetlands? This is one of the first bills, I believe, to come out of the legislative session over to the governor's desk.
Yeah, I don't believe it'll have much impact on the wetlands at all. I think it just makes some conforming definitions, some changes, eliminates certain wetland rulemaking requirements, but it doesn't change what a Class 1, Class 2, Class 3 wetland actually is. I think that was addressed a couple sessions ago.
I think as well. I think this is more of a refining of that. I think we saw both sides work very long and hard on this bill on both sides of the issue to come to a compromise. Sometimes in the legislature, I like to think that if both sides are slightly upset that they didn't get their way, that maybe we found a nice middle ground. So I supported the bill in the Senate, and do think it's a good way forward for Indiana.
Okay. Alan, thank you very much for sharing that question with us. George is next, also sharing thoughts that we can bring to our guests here. And that is, George wants to know if you could help explain House Bill 1235, prohibiting causes of action of firearms, limiting fault.
Yes, let me, this has to do, I think, with the city of Gary, and I think this has been a ongoing issue for probably close to 30 years. And I think what this does is it finally settles a lawsuit, I believe, that was up there between Gary and I think a firearms manufacturer, if I believe correctly. Essentially just saying that a political subdivision cannot bring suit against a firearms company itself.
Okay. And we'll see where that goes.
Yeah.
We'll look forward to reading more about it. The mayor of Gary right now was a former senator, Eddie Melton. Actually, Eddie and I exchanged some text messages last weekend, so I'll be looking forward to reaching out to him. And certainly we have so many bills on both sides. And right now, I think when we get home tonight and probably Saturday and Sunday, that both Representative Judy and I will be reading furiously to get through what each chamber has passed.
And I think this passed out of the House last year and may have not moved any farther.
I don't believe
so.
Yeah,
If I'm correct.
Okay. George, we thank you very much for that as well. There are new initiatives coming forward. One of them in Senate Bill 10 that you've co-authored. I thought it might help viewers understand that healthcare, in a word, may be going mobile a little more through a Community Care Initiative grant pilot program. Several from the Northeast Indiana delegation in on this one.
Yeah, I think that this is another opportunity where we could look to the local level to be helpful and provide some services for the government that's closest to the people to be able to make those kind of decisions. So happy to go sponsor that.
And on the House side, several pieces, Chris, that I am happy to have you go wherever you'd like to see this travel. But you have a bill, first of all, regarding Hoosier First Responder Medal of Honor.
Yes. Co-authored this bill. It's Representative Lucas's bill. And what it does is it creates a Hoosier Medal of Honor through the Department of Homeland Security. And they will set the criteria for this. There's certain language in there that has to be met. If they recognize a first responder that is deemed worthy of this Medal of Honor, they can nominate them. Then they send that actual nomination to the representative or senator for that individual. And then that representative or senator can follow up with the governor's office to request that Medal of Honor be given to that individual. Now, if the Department of Homeland Security deems that doesn't reach that high threshold, there's other awards that the Department of Homeland Security already gives to our first responders. So it just creates that Medal of Honor for our first responders. It's pretty neat.
Yeah.
A lot of worthy recipients too. We've seen the work that I think that Joel Benz has done with TRA here locally, and I actually give a lot of credit to the mayor as well, Mayor Henry. I really think that without that kind of leadership and the folks that have worked together, we may have seen some folks have some delays in getting those that need health care the most. So I commend my colleague for that. We got heroes right here at home as well.
Yeah. One of the things that was made known through this session here recently is something I wanted to ask you both to comment about, that we hear of hearings where there is discussion on legislation that is being proposed. There is also the opportunity for hearings to take place on legislation that is just not ready for prime time, or has been admittedly, we are doing fact-finding in this hearing. With the idea that that bill or notion will live again in a different session by another number. Talk about that process, because in a sense, some of 2024 is prepping for possibly 2025.
Sure. Well, Bruce, here at Channel 39, you're always ready for prime time, as it says behind me here. But unfortunately, some of this legislation is not quite there. So I think it's an opportunity for us to talk about that, right? I mean, a lot of what we do here in the state legislature is that we like to, kind of clear these ideas and talk about them. And we, of course, will, in the longer session, take on bigger ideas. So it's a good way for us right now to kind of clear some of those ideas, come up with good ideas. Same way we have, summer study session where we get to talk about those ideas. So there's certainly some bigger ideas as far as reforming healthcare and trying to lower the price of healthcare for all Hoosiers that I hope to talk about this year. That I think we'll have a better shot at, talking when we have 4 months instead of a truncated 2.5, if you will, this time.
Yeah.
And I think it also gives the public the opportunity to speak on the issue as well.
Correct. Yeah.
And a lot of these things have are budgetary issues that can only be dealt with while we're in a budget session. So it gives the public the ability to come in and testify on these issues before we actually deal with it in the following session.
Yeah. When you see where we are now, where we've said a third of Senate bills, maybe 25% of House bills, moving on into the second half, it causes everyone to kind of adjust their vision a little bit. But what are you still looking at in these closing weeks of the session as far as legislation that either you've authored and therefore carry an interest, or just still feel that a certain bill, is holding that same level of interest, and looking forward to seeing what happens next with it? Let me start with you, Justin.
Yeah, I think that I'm excited to see what the House has done. Representative Judy and I have talked about some of those things. I know the other representatives here in Northeast Indiana, we do a great job of what's going to affect here. I know that, on the other side of the aisle, on the House side, that's a Minority Leader Gia Quinn and I usually have our mid-session meeting and say, hey, there's some bills I want you to look at because it affects Indiana. He says, here's some bills you'd like to see here as well. So I think we work really good as a team here. And I think there's a reason why we have a short session, right? There's some tweaks and some things we need to do. And I know that my legislative calendar and schedule of bills that I hope to bring is certainly a lot more robust than it is this time. But there's a lot of important bills. And I think it's also important to note, and I know that Chris will say this as well, but of the majority, I think it's around 88 to 90% of the bills that we pass in the Senate are also bipartisan. So, to forget what you see on TV, maybe on Fox News or CNN, the nationals, I think we all work really well together there. So excited to see what my colleagues have to offer, and certainly also the tweaks that we'll see from the House with some of the ideas we had in the Senate.
Cool. Great.
Yeah, we're going to have 2 weeks of essentially committees, and then committee deadline, I think, is the following Monday. And then we'll have second reading, third reading, and then we'll have conference committees for about a week. So it's going to move fast. I think we're going to move along, and I come to an agreement on some of these, and some I think you may see some fall to the wayside. That's just part of the process as well. I think what I'm looking at is possibly trying to squeeze some language into for some veterans yet to this session. Back in 2011, before Justin and I were here, those veterans that are service-connected, disabled veterans, if you enlisted after 2011, instead of getting 100% tuition for your children to go to a state university, it's based off your service-connected disability rating, that percentage. So looking at this, Kerry Hamilton, actually a Democrat from Indianapolis, authored this bill this year, but it doesn't have a fiscal for another 10, 20 years. So trying to work to see if we can possibly get that language in somewhere to help those veterans that are service-connected disabled veterans that enlisted after 2011. So.
All right, coming soon.
So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. A quick question from Caleb. Will there be any new legislation limiting the sale of extra bright headlights?
Yeah, Caleb, I don't believe I've seen anything from our Senate colleagues, but I can understand that. Sometimes as the older I get, I think the lights get brighter, but I have not seen anything on the Senate side.
Yeah, I haven't seen a bill introduced this session, and it's too late to introduce any bills going. But again, I'd have to agree with Justin. As the older I get, those lights get brighter.
Someone had a bright idea, and that was embodied in House Bill 1019, and I will defer to the senator on my right. This is regarding that reference to lemonade stands on private property. There ought to be a law. There ought to be a law.
Well, if there's a award for best transition, Bruce, you've made it there with bright idea. Yes, my colleague on the House has talked about this. This is one of those bills that unfortunately has to come here, where certain health departments are coming in to limit the amount of kids who like to make beverages made of water, sugar, and lemons. I think a lot of us have maybe bought one for 50 cents at a garage sale. This is kind of maybe a little bit of government overreach, and maybe a piece of Americana that needs to return to not be shut down. A lot of that's happened in Marion County. So I'm happy to have this and to have our youngsters there. As the the godparents of my two nephews, who I think are maybe up a little longer with Nana and Pop Up right now, Jack and Tommy. This is something that I think that we can all welcome. The Norman Rockwellian nature of Indiana to return to its rightful place.
Yeah, I was unaware that my daughter was breaking the law by having a lemonade stand.
Well, don't put that bail money yet, Representative Judy. Don't worry, I'm fighting for your children.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We'll raise a paper cup in your honor as the session continues, and best wishes to you both, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On
Thank
the
you
way
very much.
forward, and thank you for allowing us to be a part of your evening. With State Senator Justin Busch and State Representative Chris Judy, for all of us with Primetime, I'm Bruce Haines. Take care, and we'll see you again next week. Good night. The preceding program on PBS Fort Wayne was made possible in part by
Businesses constantly evolve. The Rogers Company started as Rogers Markets in 1944. Today, the Rogers Company is commercial property and real estate development and a proud supporter of PBS Fort Wayne. The Regional Chamber of Northeast Indiana advocates for world-class infrastructure, a competitive business climate, 21st century talent, and rural investment. One region, one voice. NEINadvocates.com.